Everybody. Yeah, welcome to the July monthly membership meeting of the Haight-Ashbury Neighborhood Council. I'm David. I'm on the HANC board. I'm glad you're all here with us today. Yeah, we got some special guests. We got Stanley Mouse with us. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. And we also have Nancy with SF Heritage also. Who will be discussing the Artist in Residency program at the Dulon Larson building. And then later also we're going to hear from Calvin on how the Haight voted in this last election in June. And we're also going to do an update on new small businesses in the Haight. So before we go over to Stanley, we'll just open it up for just kind of general announcements. If anyone has announcements they want to make, you just unmute yourself or put them in chat also. All right, seeing no announcements, feel free to throw them in the chat later if you think of anything or you want to have anything to share with folks. But yeah, I'll turn it over to Richard, who's gonna introduce our first guest. Pass it to you, Richard.
Okay, well, I don't have a whole lot to say. We've got Stanley Mouse at his studio and Peter McQuaid helping him out. And Nancy Gilly is with SF Heritage, and she will follow them. So take it away, Stanley and Peter.
I'll say just a word. I'm Peter McQuaid, and I've been interested in helping out with an idea or two for the Dulon Larson property for some time. And I'm extremely happy that recently I've been working there to bring art in, and Stanley Mouse really needs no introduction. I think he's a great first big name to take to the gallery there at 1506 Haight Street. And I brought evidence of what Stanley did in 1966, I think. Mouse, is that when you started there?
67.
67. He had a gallery himself just 2 blocks away from where his current show is. And I would encourage everybody to take time to go check it out. It's been delightful to meet some of the old residents that have been there a long, long time and can even remember back to the 60s, and then a lot of people that this is an adventure for. So if there's anyone, I guess, that wants to inquire about what it was like in the early days, this is a good guy to ask. So that's what I would say.
I could tell a story.
Good.
About the Pacific Ocean Trading Company, which everybody calls POPCO. Everything was happening on Haight Street, but then me and like four or five other people got together and rented this store, and we only had a button machine, and so we started making buttons. We had a table and we started making buttons. We made a famous one, a Janis Joplin button, from some proof sheets that I had of her photographs. And we made like $70 selling buttons. And we all ran down to the grocery store, bought some white bread and bologna, and brought it back, and we had a feast because everybody was so hungry. Living in the Haight-Ashbury and being in the scene. And then we started getting people to bring in things that they made, like necklaces and beaded stuff and artwork. And I put in a lot of posters, and we were off and running, making some money. And then the human being happened, and then Monterey, and it was a lot of fun. A lot of times we closed the doors and we put out a whole lot of chairs, and we all just sat inside, smoked some weed, and watched the parade go by. And they were just, it was like a parade of people with drums and cymbals and everything you can imagine. And so we would just shut the door and lock it and just sit there and watch it like a show. And like, you know, a tour bus would come by. I remember one time a tour bus broke down in front of the shop, and it was steaming, and it was a very hot summer day, and the people wanted to get off the bus. They were afraid to get off the bus. And so they sat in this bus without air conditioning for hours until they fixed it. Otherwise, I can't think of anything else.
So the scene was too much for them to handle. They were from somewhere else.
Yeah. There were people from the military that would come and they put on a wig.
And how long did you have the shop, Stanley? You came in '67. Was it there a couple of years?
I just had it for a year.
Yeah, 1 year.
Yeah,
Well,
because after '67, the whole thing went down the tubes.
yeah, you know, I've heard so many people recall that after the pop festival, which was September '67, I think Labor Day, you know, the music just went out into the labels, and the artwork went to designers, and you know, it just exploded.
Well, I think what really happened was Bobby Kennedy got shot, and Martin Luther King got shot, and it was a disaster. And it was dangerous to be on the street. And everybody left. I think that might have been the plan.
And when you go today, it seems to me there still is a parade on 8th Street. You know, in the last couple of months, I've been going there daily. We have a little shop, and you open up, and the locals are there in the morning, and there's a neighborhood. But the characters, you know, there's a cast of characters still.
It's similar.
Yeah, it is. So I think, Nancy, what Heritage has done in committing to the artist in residency is brilliant. And I applaud you and everybody over there. It's been an exciting privilege for me to be part of all of that. You know, it's
Something.
Yeah.
The posters. Me and the other poster artists were doing posters for like the Avalon Ballroom in Fillmore like every week. And they would go up on telephone poles and in all the store windows everywhere in San Francisco and in Berkeley.
Mhm.
It was kind of an amazing event.
I liken it to like the social media of the day. I mean, that's how your community communicated, is through just communicative art that would go onto a flag. You know, there's a meeting, there's going to be something in the park. The human being, I mean, how was that publicized? You did a poster for it,
Right.
and 25,000 people showed up without a press agent or Chronicle, you know, advertising or radio or any of that stuff. So the posters were so important to the formation of that community.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because outside of the Doolin Larson, there's a telephone pole that is immaculately covered with the staples from all of those posters. And I sometimes think, we're trying as an organization to preserve San Francisco's architectural and cultural unique identity, and things like that telephone pole that are covered with all of the staples from those, thousands of posters is really evidence of that. But I had a question for you, Peter, and for Stanley. How did you choose the art that you have on display? Because Stanley's body of work is amazing. How did you choose what you put on display at the 1506 gallery?
That's easy for me to answer first, because I've learned from experience, this is the guy that knows what to put up. So I said, Stanley, we're having a show. And I sent him the dimensions of the room. And the day of the show, a van showed up, and out it came, and up it went. Because you're right, there's so much art, there's so many different mediums and periods and subject matter. There's fine art, there's portraits, there's doodles. I mean, you got it. And so that show was put together by Stanley in the week before, I assume.
Yeah.
We were just,
I kind of wanted to experiment to see what people reacted to.
yeah,
So I put a kind of a mixture of stuff. And Peter is telling me that a lot of the reaction is to a lot of the stuff that I wouldn't expect.
that's right. Yeah, I've learned to, as someone that was there and kind of advanced, and I relate to the Grateful Dead. I relate to the countercultural movement and all that. But I ask people when they come in now, do you remember the 1960s? And a lot of them weren't born in the 1960s, and they're drawn to some of the art that Stanley did in Detroit as a very young man, prior to all the psychedelic stuff, the hot rod art and the monsters.
Hence this painting.
Yeah, this would get a lot of attention.
This is a
believe me.
new painting.
Yeah, so it's interesting to see what does get the attention. But it's I think we're going to bring some new stuff down next week, and if there's time for the people that are going to join and see this, they should just come in and check it out. It's a great show.
Well, the new painting is fantastic. And I also, on behalf of the neighborhood and the merchants especially, want to thank Stanley belatedly, because when we were going through COVID and all of the storefronts on Haight Street were getting covered up with plywood and it looked like a war zone, you were so incredibly generous, Stanley, in offering to say, I'll do artwork on these storefronts so we don't have to look at just gray paint. And I think that one of the first people to take us up on that offer was Cold Steel, which I believe is right next door to where Potco was located.
That's
Right.
about 2 doors away. That's
So
right.
a belated thank you to you for that really generous work that you did.
That was through Peter and Roger McNamee and the Haight Street Art Center.
Yeah,
Well,
a lot of fun.
thank you. So Richard, shall we see if people have questions that they want to ask of Stanley, and then I'll follow on with what's going on at Doolin Larson with the Artist in Residence program?
Sure. So people can either unmute or put questions in the chat.
Mm.
And I guess you answered our question, sort of. What was the address of the shop? And I guess 2 doors down from where Cold Steel is now.
Do you remember the address, Stanley? I know it's 1700 and it's in
1411.
It was, 1711 Haight Street,
Okay.
San Francisco.
Okay.
Great. Thank you. And the other question we had was about the painting behind you, but you already did mention that. So anybody in the audience have questions?
I have a question. Richard?
Yes,
Go ahead.
for it.
Oh, okay. Well, what happened after the shop? I mean, you just had an amazing career of doing posters, and I'm wondering if you could just tell us something about that, like how you got commissioned, or how people found you, or just how that whole thing happened?
After what?
After leaving 8th Street, I
Oh.
left in the show.
I went to England. I got a call from Eric Clapton asking me to paint his Rolls Royce, flame his Rolls Royce. And so I made a beeline to London and stayed there for a year and worked for Eric Clapton and Blind Faith and the Beatles. And it was fantastic.
And then you came back to the Haight?
Then I came back to San Francisco, right? Close. I came back. I lived in this place on the corner of Castro and Market when it was still a mom and pop neighborhood.
And then how did you get the commissions here in San Francisco
The commission for what?
for posters and the stuff that you did here?
Like Through the Dead, you were friends with all those guys. They would call you.
Oh, what happened was when I came out here, I made friends with Kelly. And Kelly was the art director for the Family Dog. And so I started doing posters. And then Kelly and I teamed up and we did like the Zigzag poster and the Skeleton and Roses poster. And did a lot of them, and they were going straight to like museums around the world. And we knew we were doing something important. And also the other artists in San Francisco. It was a great time.
So a lot of bologna sandwiches, in other words.
And I got in with the Grateful Dead because they were just one of the bands playing at the venues in San Francisco. You know. Then they asked us to do their album cover. And the rest was
And
history.
that was one of the first jobs for them. You also did the fan club poster. And that was around the time that they put out the record with Warner Brothers.
Right.
And then you just got a string of jobs after that. So
Other folks have questions?
and let me say, and hearing this, it's striking to me because I've done business in this world for a long time, and now it's pretty conventional how it works. There's record companies, there's merchandising companies, and there's artists and rock and roll bands. And in those days, it was just more of a community where you would work directly with the band. You know, you would work with Jerry Garcia if he wanted something done for the Carousel Ballroom when they ran it. And it's unfortunate because that was a great.
Also, the beauty of it was that they didn't art direct.
Yeah.
They allowed the artists to do what they wanted to do. And I think that's why these posters had so much magic to them. And years later, then the art director stepped in and got those.
See, iPhone, you have your hand up. I'm not sure who.
Yeah, that's Karen.
Oh, hey, Karen.
Seeing the picture behind you, I'm just wondering, what did the car look like that you painted?
It looks like his car crashed. He's hitchhiking now.
I'm sorry, say it again.
No, that's Eric Clapton's car. His
Oh,
Rolls.
Yeah.
When I got to London, he had just got busted for hashish. And he was on the run. He had a party at his manager's house. And everybody came to it. There was George Harrison. And he played his guitar and sang songs all the way till like 3 a.m. And it was a famous party, and the Beatles actually came out and did a song called The Birthday Party. And then I went, wow, this this London scene is so fantastic. And then the next morning I woke up and I had to go get a hotel at East End, London. So I had gone from the top of the crust in the London scene to the very bottom in 24 hours. But then I worked my way up into the hung on Apple for a while.
I see another question in chat, and I have a question too, but maybe I can.
So,
Maybe I can.
so he never got a flame job on his Rolls Royce.
So you never claimed the roles. No.
Should we try playing the video clip?
Yeah.
See.
Yeah, it's a great look at the show. It's wonderful.
Yeah, let me try.
It actually showed loading in, I believe. It was shot as the art was arriving. Yeah, so.
Right.
All right, let me try. All right, give me 1 sec. Let me share screen. All right. Oh wait, hold on. All right. Here we go. All right, let's see.
Ah, good. Well,
If it was too glitchy, the links in the chat, you can look at the YouTube separately from the Zoom too.
But it played pretty smoothly. It looked
Oh, great. Okay, cool. Yeah, I was worried about it.
I have another question. Who came up with the idea of the skeleton and the roses? Was that your idea?
Who, me?
Has to be used to.
Kelly and I would go to the library a lot and look in the stacks, and they had a great collection of antique posters, poster books on posters, and we would scour through there looking for ideas for poster art, and we came across that Ruby out of Umar Khayyam, illustrated by Edwin Sullivan, and saw it and said, "This says Grateful Dead all over it." And so, should I say it?
Yeah, you can tell them. It's statute of limitations has run out. Stan.
So Kelly cut it out of the book with his penknife. I fessed up to the library a couple of years ago. And luckily,
They said it was okay.
They said it was okay. But, I tell everybody that we Xeroxed it, but there's there was no, there weren't Xerox machines back then. But anyway, I colored it in and we did the poster for it. It's been amazing since.
And about 2 million t-shirts later,
Yeah.
that's the story.
I noticed that I saw Edmund Sullivan, so I got a book by him. His handwriting was really similar to mine.
Wow.
There might be something there.
I think so. So are you going to come back to the gallery anytime and sign more posters and stuff?
Sunday, I'm having a book signing.
Day after tomorrow at 3 o'clock.
Yeah.
3 to 5.
At the gallery?
At 1506 Haight Street. So Gallery 1506 Haight on Sunday from 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock.
Super. It's awesome. We will be there. Thank you.
And I'm going to also jump in because there's been a lot of mention about the Grateful Dead and Jerry Garcia and all of that. And I'm going out of order of my presentation, but it seemed opportune is to let everyone on this call know that the city of San Francisco is designating the week of August 8th to the 14th as Jerry Garcia Week. And it is in honor of what would have been his 80th birthday. And Haight Street is going to be a large part of this. And I believe we might be working with Stanley to do the poster for this first annual Jerry Garcia Week in San Francisco. So put that on your calendar as well.
This since you brought it up, Nancy, this is it hadn't been planned, but about a month ago I was here and Stanley was just working on this impression of Jerry at 710 back in the old days. And it's a painting that he made. And so this is a sample, a test print that we've made, and that's going to be the basis for the poster.
That's legendary 710 Ashbury.
Well, that's a very interesting idea. Garcia was born in the Crocker Amazon and grew up in the Crocker Amazon.
Right.
Had nothing to do with the Haight-Ashbury as a young San Franciscan. And his wife famously, at least for me, famously said in about 1985 from her comfortable digs in Marin County, asked if she ever returned to the Haight-Ashbury. And she said, why would I? Nobody is in the Haight-Ashbury anymore. So I guess all of us nobodies will be proud to host what for Jerry Garcia? I don't quite understand.
It's going to be Jerry Garcia Week and
Wow.
SF Travel. And so there's likely to be a concert down in the Panhandle and different activities. It's in the works right now. My goal in mentioning is it just to get it on everyone's calendar that you're aware that that's coming up. So do we have other questions for Stanley or Richard? Would you like me to launch into?
Well, just before that, Nancy, there's been an annual Jerry Days festival in the south of the city, just one day, I think. So it'll be great to expand that since we are all about tourists. And thank you. So go on, Nancy. Then.
Yeah, there's an amphitheater named for Jerry in the
Yes.
Crocker Amazon.
Right.
And there's also on the 2nd of August, which is one day after Jerry's 80th birthday, the San Francisco Giants are hosting a Garcia night at the ballpark, and that raises quite a bit of money for the Rex Foundation, which of course was the charity that Jerry and the Dead put together a long, long time ago.
Okay.
I think, yeah, go ahead, Nancy.
Yeah, go ahead, Nancy.
Okay. Well, I'm going to first of all, I already put this into the chat, but I want everyone to be aware of this website, hateandashbury.org, because that is San Francisco Heritage's website for the Doolin Larson building. And if you haven't gone on there, it's a great place to take a look at what we've already done and what's coming. But I'm going to save you the burden of doing that and talk a little bit about what's happened and what is coming. Specifically the Artist in Residence program. Before everyone got on this call, I was sharing with Richard that Heritage started the Artist in Residency program in September of 2020 with Jeremy Fish. So in the very visual artist, Jeremy Fish, in the very early days of COVID. And we were generously did that in coordination with the Haight Street Arts Center and the city, the grants for the arts program. And so we had Jeremy Fish in there. And I think honestly, just because we didn't know any better, we continued the Artist in Residence program following Jeremy through COVID, while many other Artist in Residence programs, both locally and on a national basis, were closing down. And so we were able to do something that was fairly unique at a very challenging time. And in the time between Jeremy Fish at the end of 2020 until today, we've had 8 artists in residence, and these have ranged from visual artists to musician composers, to dancers, to the actor Jimmy Fales, who you may know was co-writer and starred in Last Black Man in San Francisco. So we've had a series of artists in residence, and for us, an artist in residence can mean one of two things. It can mean living up in Norm's house, and a quick shout out to Norm Larson. Hopefully many of you recognize Norm, who came to be known as the Duke of the Haight. Living in Norm's residence for anywhere from as short as 4 weeks to 3 months, depending on the type of work that they are doing. So that can be living up in the residence, or it can be the Gallery 1506 Haight Street, so a non-resident artist. And that's what we have done with Stanley. And thank you so much, Stanley, and thank you, Peter, for making that happen. We did one hybrid prior to Stanley's arrival, and that's with the artist Mark Dean Vecca, who is a Southern California-based artist who came up and lived in the house for a month, but also did a show of his work at Gallery 1506. And hopefully some of you saw that. Very, very interesting work that he does. And so the Artist in Residence program is something that San Francisco Heritage envisions will be a part of the long-term plan for the property. Other plans for the property are still under development. We did kind of put the brakes on that with COVID, and that is starting again now. But the Artist in Residence program, we definitely see as being a long-term contributor. The mission of it, I should share with you, is to invite not only artists, but also activists and academics or scholars to spend time in the Haight-Ashbury with the echoes of the counterculture, and keeping in mind San Francisco Heritage's mission, which, as I mentioned earlier, is to preserve and enhance San Francisco's unique architectural and cultural identity. So all of those things that make San Francisco the wonderful city that it is. So that's what's going on with the Artist in Residence program. I would also be remiss if I didn't mention last year, we also hosted at the Gallery 1506 iZen, and they did a 2-month run of a performance that focused on Peggy Caserta, a legendary fixture from the 1960s, the woman who owned Nasitica, the store at 1510 Haight Street, was the lover of Janis Joplin and is credited with by Levi Strauss as inventing bell-bottom jeans. So iZen did their program focusing on Peggy Caserta and also Hibiscus of the Coquettes. So that's another where we've brought in a nonprofit and allowed them to use Gallery 1506. Similarly with Value Culture and Joe Good Performance Group, who used the entire building last summer. So that's kind of the artist in residence program. And maybe I should just take a quick pause and see if anyone has any questions for me, because then what I wanted to talk about was 2 more things that are coming up in the near future that I'd like everyone to be aware of. So any questions about the artist in residence program?
I just have a question. I mean, I can't believe I missed all that. I missed Joe Good. I missed all of it. And how can we get sort of looped in so that we don't keep missing things in the future?
Well, I would really say, go to the website hateandashbury.org, and there is a tab on there. I forgot what the title of it is, but it's telling you what's coming next. But I think also one of our goals ought to be to make sure that we are regularly communicating, whether it's through the HANC newsletter, the HANC email list, the Merchants Association, what is going on the street, because like you, all too often things happen and I don't hear about them until afterwards.
I think you should staple things to telephone poles.
I think with Stanley's poster for Jerry Garcia Week, I automatically said, we've got to do that. Yes.
Yeah.
So if anyone wants to volunteer to help staple posters with me, let me know. Please sign up in the chat.
Do you have to have a permit to do that? We just heard that you're not allowed to put anything up on the posts anymore.
You know, I imagine that they probably didn't have permission back in the 60s. I think it's something that we can work with the city on. They're very, very interested in making this happen in a meaningful way. They've offered to close the street if we wanted to do a flatbed truck concert, things like that. So we'll have to see, but I'm willing to have my hand slapped.
Yeah, a friend of mine told me all their posters got pulled down, so I didn't know if it was just they clean it up every week and just take it all down or something, but that'd be cool that you get permission or don't.
It would be fun to see him back up there. Yeah. Any questions about artists in residence or about the house itself? And I see someone has posted the comment, and I think it's a fantastic one. And in fact, it could happen potentially later this year, is that we make the 1506 gallery space available, possibly even November and December, to local artists in the neighborhood to show their work and maybe do like a little bit of a pop-up show. So I will relay that back to San Francisco Heritage.
Yeah, maybe one question kind of going with that is like how does it come about to choose certain folks who go in there or what to show?
It's been a great question, or that's a fantastic question. We have a task force that reviews proposals that are made. We don't yet have a formal proposal system. That's part of what we're working on right now that we've gotten, we believe, through the worst of COVID and can refocus on this. So we will be instituting a formal application process, and probably twice a year where people submit applications for an artist in residency. So that artist in residency could be for living upstairs. It could be for the 1506 space as well. And right now we're envisioning that we review those twice a year. It could very well be that we find out that we need to do it more often than that. But that is all in the works right now in terms of the formal process.
Calvin, go ahead.
Yeah, I wonder if it might be possible if the Haight-Ashbury Neighborhood Council or folks at this meeting could make a suggestion to your task force about what should be displayed at some date. Perhaps people remember that there was a very famous private detective, Joe Palomedino, who lived at Masonic and Page, and was tragically killed in resisting his camera being stolen by an auto-bound thief. Palomino, for the last several years of his life, spent a good deal of his time taking photographs of residents of the Haight-Ashbury. And I think it would be really fitting that his photos, if his family would agree, should be displayed on Haight Street. And your facility makes great sense to be that place for him to be displayed. He did literally fight for his life to save his camera. Unfortunately, he gave up his life, but the camera was saved. So I wonder if it would be possible for you guys to consider showing the Palomino photographs at your facility.
Calvin, I would encourage you. I think we're open to any range of ideas, and I'm familiar with Mr. Palladino's story and terrible demise. I think if you'd like to email us, or anyone on this call, if you have an idea, email that to San Francisco Heritage, and I can put my email address, or Richard can circulate it afterwards. Is send in a thought like that. You know, we may not have the ability to organize it, but we could work with you or others to make it happen if it makes sense. So that's a great idea. So if there aren't any other questions, the two things that are coming ahead that I wanted to mention, one, of course, is that Stanley will be at 1506 Gallery this Sunday from 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock. I've already mentioned Jerry Garcia Week coming up next month. The other thing that I wanted to let you know was that at Gallery 1506 for the month of August, Stanley will be with us, but he's going to work with us to shift the focus from the current exhibit a little bit more towards legacy businesses on Haight Street. And if you're not familiar with the term legacy business, I'm going to encourage you to go to the sfheritage.org website and read about legacy businesses, which are businesses that have gone through an application process and been selected by the city to be recognized as a legacy business. Again, something that contributes to the nature of our neighborhood and our unique identity. And so in August, the space at 1506 will focus on legacy businesses on Haight Street. That includes Ob Zamzam, that includes FTC, it includes Piedmont, which is right now in the application process. And we're also going to be proposing to the neighbors, and look for your input on some other businesses on Haight Street or in the Haight neighborhood that qualify for legacy status, but simply haven't gotten there yet. And then Heritage will work with at least one of them to make that happen. So that's coming in the month of August, and very much encourage you to stop by and take a look at that. The second thing that I wanted to mention that's a little bit further out, it's going to start in September and it will be complete by November 1. This is a light installation called Afterglow, and it's designed by local artist Joshua Hubert, and it's being funded by the city with funds to the Merchants Association. And the light installation, Afterglow, will involve hanging of about 5-inch diameter globe lights every 6 feet down the street from Central to Stanyan. And these are LED lights that are programmable. And what Joshua Hubert has done is programming them so that the color changes are timed in such a way to create a psychedelic effect. And so they will be on in the evenings and go off sometime in the early morning hours, but hopefully we'll get a lot of people to come back down to Haight Street and take a look at this light installation. So those are two things that are coming, and I think that finishes what I have to say.
Could I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Could you give us a brief history of the heritage on the group that you mentioned?
I'll be as brief as possible. San Francisco Heritage turned 50 years old last year. It was started really as a grassroots organization in the early 1970s when two gentlemen, one of whom is still in San Francisco today, sat down and they were really taken aback by all of the Victorians that were being destroyed in the Western Addition. And they thought, what can we do about this? And they banded together and formed this nonprofit by the name of San Francisco Architectural Heritage at that time. And they went about and they negotiated with the city to buy 12 of those houses that were otherwise going to be destroyed and relocated them to other locations in the city. So there are 12 Victorians that otherwise would be gone from our landscape had it not been for the work of Harry Miller and his good friend, Charles Page. So they did that. So Heritage has been around for 50 years. As I said, our focus started out with more on the architectural side. So it would be buildings in San Francisco, whether that's the Ferry Building or the Women's Building in the Mission, any building that they felt was significant to San Francisco's history, Heritage is interested in working to preserve. Our mission expanded in the last 15 years to also include cultural. And so we recognize that cultural, whether it's a specific mural or something other than a building that is important. And the gravestones at Lincoln Park have recently been designated landmarks. So we're looking really to try to keep San Francisco unique. We remain pretty much a grassroots organization with very little funding. Our offices are located at the Haas Lilienthal House on Franklin Street. And that's open to the public. It's the only Victorian, fully furnished Victorian house that is available to the public to tour. So the offices of San Francisco Heritage are there, and Norm Larson was kind enough about 10 years before his passing to make us aware that he wanted to gift to San Francisco Heritage. And really, I see us as being stewards for San Franciscans, really for the city, the country, for everyone, that we are stewards of the building at that northwest corner of Haight and Ashbury, the Doolin Larson building, to preserve it and to tell the story, not simply of the counterculture, but also of the early days of San Francisco when the streets of Haight Street was sand dunes, and prior to the earthquake, the settling of what was then, the western half, the outside lands of the city. So that's San Francisco Heritage in a nutshell.
Good job.
Thanks, Nancy. Do any other folks have questions?
Somebody was 10 years ago.
It's coming soon.
I think we never answered Tab's question in the chat.
Oh yeah, thanks. Let's see. Do you have it up, Richard? I'm trying to scroll to it.
Thank you for the person who mentioned Two Jacks. Two Jacks is also a legacy business on the Lower Haight.
So tabs. Oops,
yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I think Tab just asked which Grateful Dead album covers did Stanley do?
And
A bunch of them.
I'd have to defer to Stanley and Peter to answer that question.
Okay, so
The first one,
first one was Grateful Dead.
the Golden Road. Yeah, yeah. Well, if the Grateful Dead was, but they referred to it as Golden Road.
Right.
And then
And then
Mars Hotel.
Mars Hotel, American Beauty,
Europe,
Working Man's Dead,
Europe 72.
Europe 72,
A lot of them.
Go to Heaven.
Yeah.
The last one, so Wave the flag.
Yeah, that was the very last, the greatest hits. Yeah, Wave
And
Flag.
Jerry Garcia's Cats Under the Stars.
It's a pretty big collection.
There's a couple more in there.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for going through the. I know that's so many. I guess one of the question I had for you, Stanley, maybe this will just be the last question if other folks don't have any, is did you was there any particular band you enjoyed working with the most, or is there any kind of one time you did some cover art that stands out to you, that especially stands out to you, that you remember?
I think that the Cats Under the Stars for Garcia was a really good one.
He always felt that was one of his real great achievements.
It might be that I'll be remembered for that one.
I think there's a lot you'll be remembered for, man.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about the music. I mean,
Well, no, the imagery though. I mean,
any of my record
you're
covers.
more responsible than anyone for that incredible kind of style guide, if you will. A lot of the art that Stanley created would then be taken and applied to a variety of different uses. It became the style guide for the regular day.
Thank you. Any other last questions? All right, well, yeah, thank you so much for joining us. It's been such a treat, and we really appreciate you spending time with Hank Stanley. So yeah, thank you again.
We all unmute ourselves and give him a round of applause. Yay! So amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you to Nancy too.
We are
Yeah.
so appreciative.
Also,
Yeah.
thank you to
Yeah.
Nancy.
Yeah, thank you,
And
Nancy,
thank
so
you,
much for
Nancy.
coming.
Pleasure.
All right, so yeah, folks, definitely make sure to go get over there and check out SF Heritage and Stanley's work while it's up. It's such a treat. We appreciate it.
Good evening.
All right, so we're gonna switch over now to Calvin and how the hate voted this past June election. Just shifting gears a little bit, so I'll throw it over to you, Calvin.
Well, I wonder if we might change the order and perhaps deal with new businesses. I no doubt my presentation will drive people away, no doubt. It's like watching already dried paint, but there is perhaps more interest in the new businesses on 8th Street. So I wonder, David, if we might go to that, and I'll deal with the hardy remnants at the end of the meeting.
Sure. Yeah, we can. I don't think that's true, but yeah, we can do that. Tess, you maybe want to help run us through some of these? I can put up some of the. I know Tess did a lot of the footwork and collected some photos for us that I can throw up. And I don't think we have Kristen with us to help.
Yeah, it's challenging because something that I might think of as new, Kristen can say, oh, it's been here for 2 years or something like that. And so other people can chime in if you can say, well, that one's not new within a year. But it's kind of fun to look at some of the businesses that have been coming in and see which ones you might want to patronize. And what would you like, what's missing still among our businesses? So we've got a few pictures we can look at.
Yeah, let me throw them up.
One I don't think I have a picture of well, here's a good one. It seems like pets always need stuff. So here we have a pet store now just up the street from us. And you can see what's all on the sign. Okay, next one. Now, this one, I'm not sure if it's been less than a year or not, but I love the glass ball display that's over in this window. Next one. What would be Haight Street without a new clothing store? And we have yet another one that's going to be opening soon where the record store was. So there they are, 2nd Street, okay.
This is a good one. It's the action shot
Yeah,
at 2nd Street.
now this one I'm not sure again about how new it is, but I noticed a number of visitors looking at it very closely earlier today. And that's near where the Planet store was. Okay. And one that is not included in that set, we have Love Haight, which is a computer repair store that moved from the lower Haight up to our part of the woods. And it's located next to the yarn store Firebird on the east side of Masonic, north side. So if you want to get computer help. So that and the pet store I thought were the two that probably, and we also, I think, have a new barber shop. It seems like there's about one on every street now, every block. So, and
Some more.
yeah, I was surprised the Burton store had versatile layers. So we also included in the new store concept that, changes in merchandise. So not just skateboards and snowboards. Do you have any others, David? Ah, yes. And another bookstore. This would be maybe more of the tourist merchandise, but also for plants and the computer store. Yeah, I have a picture of Kimono Dave's, whether it got into this deck or not. But thank you, Catherine, for mentioning it. Yeah, there it is. I'm not sure. It's definitely an interesting model, and they change their display often too. So it's fun to walk by there.
I think I got one more.
Yeah, well, so again, the computer repair store is on Haight, the north side, east of Masonic, about halfway, a little more than halfway down, next to the Firebird store, Firebird Yarns. And it didn't have a sign in the window when I went by and took a picture of it. So you kind of had to look for something next to the yarn store unless they've got a sign up now.
So is the street looking fairly filled in now, Tessa, or are there still a lot of empty storefronts?
I think there's still a lot of empties, but again, most of us know that the ones that the biggest area that are empty by the owner's choice. But it's definitely filling in from my perspective. Kristen will have to add something another time.
That seemed like quite a few.
Yeah. Okay, I see a couple of people are popping. Yeah, okay, there it is. That's a picture of the computer store. And you can see on the right, the yarn store next to it. Now, that's the Love Haight computer repair and other services. So you have to be able to visually find it. Yeah, I think we're going to get more. And just think about some of the others that are not so new. For example, the huge plant store and an art store at the corner of Masonic, the southwest corner. That's relatively new, maybe 2 years or something. And across kitty corner next to the People's Coffee, there's a psychedelic shop, a psychedelic art that's relatively new too. So yeah, we're gaining more, I think, than we're losing right now. Okay, that's all I have for that one right now. Thank you.
Thanks, Tess. Appreciate it. And thanks for taking those photos so we could see. All
Yeah,
right.
I think a couple of those that Tess showed are actually storefronts in the Doolin Larson building. Nancy might know.
Yes, they are. Haight and Ashbury at the 1500 Haight Street just celebrated their 1-year anniversary. We're absolutely delighted. And it isn't just a tourist store, even for locals. You ought pop in there. They've got some really clever things. The other Aquamarine that was shown, which is located at 1510 Haight Street, has been there for a number of years, but I appreciate that they were included and glad that you like their windows, Tess.
All right. Thanks, Nancy. All right, Calvin. It's time to stare at dry paint, and your turn to go. So over to you.
Okay, David, if you can take over the screen. I have
Yes.
absolutely scintillating slides.
Yes, let me know which.
Let's start with the map.
Okay.
So for the last 10 years, this has been the Haight-Ashbury that we have analyzed voting results from now probably all through this decade. This will be the last time that these precincts will be used. I'm sorry, I think maybe November will be the last time. Because of the new district boundaries, most of the area surrounded in blue and which I refer to as the hills, and a portion of the area surrounded in red, which I refer to as the flats, will go into District 8. The remainder of all of the green and the remainder of the red will stay in District 5. These are the precinct boundaries that have obtained for the last decade. They will change next year. So the green portion, those precincts outlined in green, are referred to in the following charts as the North Panhandle precincts. The precincts surrounded in red are referred to as the Flatland precincts, and the precincts surrounded in blue are referred to as the hills. The North Panhandle is from Fulton to Fell, Stanyon to Baker. The Flatland precincts are Oak to Frederick, Stanyon to Broderick. And the hill precincts are Stanyon west to Frederick south to 17th, bounded by Ashbury, Clayton, Weave, and Stanyon Street. Next slide, the turnout, primary turnout. Well, excuse me. Yeah, primary turnout. June 22 primary turnout and timing. This is now the third election that has been conducted with 100% mailed ballots. That is to say, all voters receive a mail ballot, even if they didn't request one. And so the overwhelming majority of votes are now cast by mailed ballots. In this election, I think there was only 23,000 out of the 229,000 votes that were cast at polling places. So those of us who still go to that civic shrine, the polling place, are decidedly a distinct and perhaps distinguished minority. The overwhelming majority of folks cast their ballots by mail. But not all mail ballots come from the same place at the same time. And that's, it's really becoming, at least for me, a thing. The vote, depending upon when the mail ballot is received by the Department of Elections, or more importantly, when it is mailed, tends to be a more liberal ballot, a less progressive ballot, if it is mailed closer to Election Day than early in Election Day. Mail ballots can be received for a 30-day window, starting 30 days before the election. The overwhelming majority of polled ballots are received in the last week, the last 7 days of that 30-day period. In fact, the character of those votes are different. Votes that are counted on election night tend to be are the ones that have been received by the registrar of voters before the election. These are, I refer to them as early absentees or early mail ballots. And the overwhelming majority of ballots, however, are received, as I say, in about the last week. It is interesting to see the political character of people's behavior. It seems that more conservative people, more conservative voting people, like to vote early, like to make sure their vote, and are very, very diligent and mail their ballots very early. Most folks, however, take a longer view of the election process and cast their votes much later. And counting a mail ballot is simply not as quick as counting a paper ballot at an election, at a precinct. Just a review for people, the mail ballot is first itself in a ballot, in an envelope. So it's an envelope within an envelope. And the first thing the registrar of voters has to do when they receive these ballots is open the exterior envelope and see if it's a registered voter. And then in looking at the signed ballot, they have to eyeball the signature on the paper ballot with the signature that they have in their electronic voter registration files. So and then it is put in the automatic counter. So it's a much slower process. And whereas back in the day, before all votes were cast with mail ballots, when there was still a substantial number of votes cast on election day, the total counts on election night were much more accurate. They were the vast majority of votes counted. Now that's not the case. With mail ballots, the early count is a decidedly more conservative vote. And in our neighborhood, that's even reflected. As the North Panhandle tends to vote liberal. The flatlands tend to vote progressive to left. And the hills precincts vote decidedly moderate. And if you take a look at, I broke down when the ballots were counted for each precinct. That's my idea of a good time. As one can see in the North Panhandle, about 60% of the vote was count after the election day total was published. In the flatlands, an even more left voting area, 61% of the ballots were cast and counted late, post-election day count. And in the moderate voting hills, 56% were, but that's less than the 61 and 60% in the more liberal voting areas. And if we looked citywide, the same is true. Only 52% 52% of the citywide vote was counted after election day, was counted of votes cast after election day, whereas 59% of the Haight-Ashbury and 56% of D5, which was in this election the most progressive voting district. So more than half and almost 6 out of 4 in the Haight-Ashbury votes were cast late. So when you read the Chronicle on the day after the election, keep that in mind, that what they're projecting is a good sample, but it is not, in fact, the vote. So as you can see, turnout in the Haight, overall turnout in the Haight was 52%, that's the last column, whereas citywide it was 56%, 46%, and in District 5, it was 47%. So the Haight-Ashbury had a higher turnout than the rest of the district and a much higher turnout, 6% higher turnout than citywide. Okay, next, the HANC recommendations. So the Haight-Ashbury Neighborhood Council made 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8 recommendations. That brings the total for the decade that HANC has made 83 recommendations on state and local ballot measures over the decade. And in 92% of the cases, the recommendations of the Haight-Ashbury Neighborhood Council were how the Haight-Ashbury voted. That shows you the absolute incredible political power of the Haight-Ashbury Neighborhood Council. Not at all. What it does show, I believe, is that the membership of the Haight-Ashbury Neighborhood Council is very much and very much a part of and very reflective of the residents of the neighborhood. This time around, we changed our position on D. We first went yes, and then we reconsidered and went no. And we didn't get the word out to the folks in the Haight-Ashbury, and they voted yes on D. In all of the cases, the recommendations of the Haight-Ashbury Neighborhood Council was the vote in the neighborhood. So we'll go through precinct by precinct. So up next, let's do A and DA, A and H, David. June 22 primary Prop A and DA recall. As folks may remember, Proposition A was the muni bond for capital improvements and also street safety and bicycle improvements for San Francisco. And it required a 2/3 vote, that's 66.67 yes vote, and it failed, 65%, failing to get the necessary 2/3 vote. But in the Haight-Ashbury gave Proposition A the highest vote that it got in the city as a percent of the total vote cast. The North Panhandle voted a handsome 78% yes on the muni bond. The Flatland voted 79% yes. And our good friends, even the moderate voting Hill precincts, went heavily for Proposition A. So as we voted heavily for A, the city voted narrowly against A. So too with the recall. The Haight-Ashbury soundly rejected the recall, as did District 5, but with a stronger margin than District 5. The North Panhandle voted 60% no on the recall. The Flatlands voted 65% no on the recall. And even the Hills voted 59% no on the recall. The Haight-Ashbury voted in total 61% no. District 5 was 58% no, which I think was the second strongest no vote. I think D9 had the strongest no vote, and D8 followed us. D5, 8, and 9 were the only three supervisorial districts that voted against the recall. That is to say, the Haight-Ashbury Western Addition, the Mission, and the Castro and Noe Valley. Every other neighborhood, every other generally progressive neighborhood, the Tenderloin, Chinatown, the South Market, the Richmond, voted yes on the recall. So it was quite astounding, the strength at which the recall was rejected here in the Haight-Ashbury. So as I like to say, as San Francisco is to California, that is to say, San Francisco generally votes to the left of California. So the Haight-Ashbury generally votes to the left of San Francisco. And I think props A and H demonstrate that clearly. So let's do the other HANC recommendations, B, C, D, E, F, and G. So here we see again an interesting phenomenon that has not been discussed much with in the media, and that is the extraordinarily strong support for measures that were characterized by their proponents as being anti-corruption measures. First of all, I don't believe the Chronicle ever even mentioned that there were 3 ballot measures on the ballot, B, E, and F, whose proponents all claimed to be measures aimed at correcting current corrupt practices that have occurred in the Breed administration. Proposition B was the building inspection change of the constituent, a minor change, but nonetheless, a change in the constituency of the Building Inspection Commission, sold by its proponents as an anti-corruption reform. You will remember that the head of the department resigned under pressure and faces an investigation and possible indictment. 2 principal players, permit expediters, were indicted. Chief amongst them was Walter Long. There was an ugly contretemps in which a former planning commissioner who claimed that the building that DBI was corrupt was himself investigated by DBI in a building that he was involved with, was hit with huge fines for violating building codes that he claimed were totally and completely retaliatory. The mayor did nothing. The mayor said nothing. The supervisors put on the ballot a measure to quote unquote reform the Department of Building Inspections Commission. Proposition E was behested payments, that is a rather clumsily drafted, so clumsy that it's probably going to have to be corrected, attempt to deal with a narrow problem with a very broad brush. Behested payments are those payments that elected officials or appointed officials urge to be made to a nonprofit. A supervisor has a favorite charity or a favorite nonprofit, San Francisco AIDS Foundation, and whoever is the supervisor from District 8, for example. And oftentimes are featured in pitches, in fundraising mailers as promoting. Supervisor X urges you to attend a fundraiser of this worthy cause. Specifically, what has been involved, however, is friends of committees of city departments. No undoing has been uncovered, or wrongdoing has been uncovered, of health and human service nonprofits who oftentimes, like the San Francisco AIDS Foundation, are often behested payment recipients that famous people endorse them and urge donations to be made for them. That has never been a problem. It has been the Friends of Departments nonprofits, the Friends of Planning, the Friends of Rec and Park, the Friends of the Department of Public Works, the Friends of the Department of Building Inspection that have been used by generally department people to receive donations from wheeler dealer inside players, Walter Wong and others, who do business with those departments. The behested payments charter amendment painted with a very broad brush that narrow problem, but was sold to voters, rightfully so, as being an anti-corruption measure to deal with corrupt practices uncovered by Rec and Park, the Department of Public Works, and the Department of the Environment under the Breed administration. F was the final reform measure, which hit old Sunset Scavenger, Recology, now Recology, with a new process of determining their fees. San Francisco is the only major city in the United States that has its garbage collected by a private for-profit entity. Even though it is a quote unquote worker-run co-op, it is a for-profit private corporation. We're the only major city in the nation that does not have city government collecting garbage and therefore being absolutely politically accountable. We have for nearly 100 years allowed that to be contracted out to the same entity. No one has ever got a different, no other entity has gotten a contract than what was originally Sunset Scavengers and later became Recology. Proposition G changes that. Proposition G gives the ability of the Board of Supervisors to award the contract to somebody else, and also sets up the possibility of the city itself doing the waste collection. That too was a major, that's what Nehru, the disgraced and convicted director of public works, had his hand in. He had two of his kids working for Recology and prevailed upon the city to give Recology an extraordinarily generous benefit, a contract so generous that the controller found it to be illegal and required Recology to make a rebate of several $1 million to San Franciscans. So Prop G went to the very heart. It may not be the solution to the heart of the problem, but the very heart of the problem of the Nehru, the whole controversy around the corruption involving the Department of Public Works. Those three measures passed, each one with a higher yes vote citywide than the bond, which required 2/3 vote. They all got 2/3 vote. even the kind of minimalist reform of Prop B passed with 69, excuse me, in D5, in 69, with 69% of the vote, 62% citywide, almost reaching 2/3. Prop E and G, excuse me, Props E and F did exceed 2/3 vote by the people citywide, and huge yes votes in the Haight-Ashbury. This was, it would seem, very bad news for Mayor Breed. But the three measures have never been linked together. The vote has never been analyzed. In districts that voted for recall and against Proposition A, the muni bond, overwhelmingly passed these measures aimed at corruption. So if there is a unifying political position in San Francisco, it isn't recalling the DA. It isn't, unfortunately, funding muni. It's in addressing corruption at City Hall. And that analysis seems to have escaped certainly the New York Times, who doesn't understand San Francisco at all, but the Chronicle and the new electronic powerhouse, the Standard. The mainline press simply ignored that, to me, extraordinarily significant vote, both in this neighborhood, which is no real surprise, but citywide. The other three measures, see the recall timeline, is a terribly sad story. It didn't pass in any district. It was opposed by the mayor, and people bought her opposition. More importantly, Supervisor Peskin, who authored the measure, simply did not organize much of a campaign and purposefully chose not to affect the mayor's appointive powers. Was going to make sure that the mayor could not appoint someone recalled, but chose not to include that requirement in the measure. And it may well have cost him. If he included the mayor and characterized this as an anti-corruption measure, it might well have passed. As it is, it only passed narrowly in the Haight-Ashbury. It got a resounding 50.3% of the vote, slightly less than the 50.4% of D5, which I believe is the only district excuse me, 50.4% no, making it the 11th district that failed to pass Proposition C. I think we're amongst the only neighbor. I think the Mission also passed it. Interestingly enough, Supervisor Peskin's base district voted no. Where he lived voted no, and his chief political allies in Chinatown also voted no on Proposition C. Proposition D, we've already talked about, won overwhelmingly. Nobody quite knows what it means, but we'll see. That's the establishing a office of victims and witness rights. The notion was that current Supervisor Stefani was looking for a job and wants to direct that new department. I guess that's after she perhaps runs for district attorney. And then finally, Proposition G was the extension of health days in a public health emergency, a declared public health emergency for businesses over, I think, 100 employees and for city government. It extends the number of health days that passed overwhelmingly. So that's my fascinating discussion of how we voted and maybe how we meant. And if anybody's awake, I'll be happy to.
Great job, Calvin.
Any
The way
questions?
you link things up, it just made a lot of patterns clearer. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome, Tess.
Yeah, thanks, Calvin. Yeah, I agree. It's the yeah, to study it, to know what to do next, or to find the patterns. Do any folks have questions or any comments?
Well, we got one more election this year, which will be in November. And as I say, I think we'll still use the same precincts. I don't think we're going to use the new districts. I don't know, Melissa, if you know what if the new district lines are going to be in effect for the November election. My belief is
They will. They will be.
They will be.
They are, yes, they are technically already in effect.
Okay, so there'll be a new map to be used. We will.
They have to be in effect for the even districts because the even supervisors are up this year.
Yes, yes. So, as I say, people want to talk about November, or would you rather? I mean, get ready for it, folks. November for Democrats is going to be a very tough month. It's a curse to live in interesting times, and we live in interesting times. And if what happens, you know, at the national level is what is expected to happen, if the House shifts, there'll be no more hearings on January 6th. What happened on January 6th? There'll be a ton of hearings on all of the illegal voting that happened in 2020. But January 6th will no longer exist as far as Congress is concerned. And it's depending upon what happens in the Senate, we could be looking at a Republican Congress. And the lamest of first-term lame duck presidents, quite possibly in the history of the Republic. And there might well be unseemly sharp elbows being thrown by various Democratic governors, including our own, which is an extraordinary prospect for anyone who lived in San Francisco when Gavin Newsom was mayor. The prospect that this empty suit with a Class A haircut, Governor Goodhair, could actually consider himself presidential timber and be taken seriously by the political press is beyond sobering. So I think what that means, since nobody else wants to talk about it, is how important our local government is going to be. I think we have to start looking at local government as the first line of defense. We already have a state government that on land use and housing issues is devastatingly one-sided. I don't know if folks saw the paper today, a Alameda County judge who has the UCSF environmental lawsuit before him, the same judge that the lawsuit that the Haight-Ashbury Neighborhood Council has been involved with around the expansion of UCSF. Judge Roche opined that the state illegally, probably illegally, he issued an injunction enjoining the state from refusing any application for rent subsidies for people placed at risk by COVID. He preliminarily found that the state illegally disallowed 160,000 applications. This is the same state government of Gavin Newsom, who wants to be president, who sees himself as presidential timber. And this is the same governor who has signed bill after bill after bill that reduces affordability requirements at the state and local level for new residential development and has green-lighted market rate development at density levels that exceed anything proposed in the previous 150 years of California's history. It's an extraordinary situation that we find ourselves in. And the November election will have several ballot measures of key importance. 3 or 4 dealing specifically with housing issues of a profound nature. All even-numbered supervisors will be up for election, at least one of whom will find it decidedly more difficult to be reelected because of the actions taken by the redistricting task force, which was openly acknowledged as doing the mayor's bidding and the mayor's office bidding. Supervisor Marr stands at great risk of being defeated in his attempt at being reelected because of the shift in the population in his district. Equally, the mayor's selection of the supervisor in District 6 has created a major pushback or a pushback. And her erstwhile ally that she backed to the hilt for the assembly, former Supervisor Hennessy, who wanted his administrative aide appointed to his seat, is now openly challenging the mayor's pick for supervisor in District 6 and is backing the election of his former chief of staff. Another political masterstroke by the mayor. We may also see a rerun of the DA's recall in that Chesa Bodine is not barred from running for election himself to be reelected against the appointee of Mayor Breed, who is reversing major policies in the DA's office regarding drug use and drug dealing. We have the chief of police wanting to be able to incorporate all video being taken in public streets to be analyzed and used after the fact in arresting not only drug dealing, but the chief said open drug use. A interesting and fascinating use of the San Francisco Police Department that was outfoxed by the Warriors parade that couldn't handle the crowd at the Warriors parade. It's a very interesting time. There will be local ballot measures and local elected officials that may offer us some cushion to what quite possibly will be devastating outcomes at the national level regarding the federal government. So
Yeah, thank you.
happy November.
Yeah, thanks, Calvin. And I see Melissa, you have your hand up. Good to see you.
Yeah. On that note, I did want to just really quickly give an update on the eviction moratorium, which I think someone had asked about. So I was able to get some information from our office. So as you may recall, our office passed a COVID-19 eviction moratorium ordinance earlier this year. And shortly thereafter, the state legislature passed a law that effectively preempted our ordinance and prevented us from enforcing it. But the state law's preemption actually ended on July 1st, which means that no evictions may be enforced for COVID-related non-payment of July rent. And that moratorium will be in place until the end of the state of emergency, which we are hearing unofficially is not expected to end anytime soon. So we're hoping that it will offer people protection for at least a few months. Unfortunately, because of the state law, any debt accrued before July 1st is still subject to eviction. But I did want to just share this link with some of this information here. And yeah, I mean, I also have a few updates if you are interested on some recent things.
Sure. Yeah, that would be great.
Great. So just yesterday, we held a press conference with the Innocence Commission from the DA's office. We are working with them to try to get newly appointed DA Brooke Jenkins to let them continue their work, which led to the exoneration and release of someone who was imprisoned for 32 years for a murder that he did not commit. And so we are hoping to continue pushing back on backwards policies that may be re-implemented given this change. I know that you all have views on this, and so I invite you to please reach out to our office if you see any really concerning trends. I did want to make a note on the surveillance law that it is much broader than just potential drug use and drug dealing. The current policy that is being proposed by the SFPD actually would allow SFPD to live monitor any cameras if there is any felony or misdemeanor being committed, which could really be anything. And in addition to that, would allow SFPD to monitor when there are crowd control issues. So pretty much any protest or rally technically would fall under that, or some, I'm sure the SFPD would argue. I think there are like ways to interpret the policy to where you would say, no, that is not technically allowed, but it's vague enough to where there is a risk. So our office is engaging with the rules committee, hoping that we can get that amended so that it isn't like this sweeping surveillance policy that has brought many organizations, including the ACLU, to oppose it.
Question.
Melissa, yeah, Karen, go ahead.
So are you saying they can commandeer private cameras, or they will be trying to enlist people with cameras, private people with cameras to sign on?
It's the latter. They can't commandeer the cameras without a warrant, but they can, right now, the way that the policy is supposed to work is they need to present a policy to the board of supervisors so that it will approve it. They have not done that, despite the fact that the original law was passed years ago at this point. And so what they're trying to do now is just get carte blanche to be able to ask private camera owners to access their live feeds at any time whenever certain conditions are met, including any crowd control or felony or misdemeanor, or, well, I guess alleged felony or misdemeanor activity, which is pretty broad.
And you're saying this has to be passed by the board?
Yes, it is before the rules committee, and we expect for a vote to happen on Monday.
And I could comment that sitting in on that rules committee hearing, it was really ghastly to think. I mean, they were giving the impression that the police were giving the impression that they were going to sit around a bunch of cameras and watch and wait for a crime to happen and then come in. I mean, like, you know, and you know who they're going to surveil the most. It ain't going to be white men. So that was pretty ghastly. Then what was the other big committee hearing that I went to this week? You can tell me, Melissa. Let's see, what was it on Wednesday? Well, there was also the one about that Kristen was organizing about the proposed Department of Housing or something, Housing and Homeless Services, that was going to be
HSH Oversight Commission.
Yeah, would you please say something about that, more articulate
Sure.
to our group here?
Sure. That was actually a vote that occurred last week, so last Monday. And what happened there is that Asha Safai, the District 11 supervisor, is proposing a charter amendment which would put a commission over the Department of Homelessness and Supportive Housing, which I think most advocates believe would be a good thing. Unfortunately, the way that he proposed it, it would allow the mayor to pick the majority of the seats. That's one thing. And then the other thing is that it doesn't make space for any folks who live in supportive housing to have like a guaranteed spot on the commission, but it does make space for merchant seats. So there was a lot of controversy around the allotment of seats. I think at the end of the day, a lot of advocates thought that a commission is better than nothing. But Kristen and a few other folks were trying to organize to potentially get an amendment at the full board, which Dean was considering carrying. We got them drafted by the city attorney. Unfortunately, we could not get enough support, and so we did not introduce them on Monday because we would have had like no second, essentially, for that amendment. And so it ended, unfortunately, but there was a really big effort by advocates, and we were glad to support those efforts. Unfortunately, it did not work out this time. But we still think overall having a commission will bring some much needed light into the Department of Homelessness and Supportive Housing. And so at this point, we don't think that we will be voting no, although we wish that we could have made that amendment or that the Rules Committee would have made it before sending it to the full board. So that is the update on that.
Well, is that the mayor's counter strike to his earlier proposal of a housing and community development commission? Do you suppose? Or where is that?
That's
Are
dead.
you? Yes. Are you? If you're referring to ours,
Yeah.
we ended up not moving that one forward, and that was mostly because of a lot of conversations with allies around it. They didn't think it was the right time. They had some like pushback on the commission itself and the way that I guess they wanted to focus on more transformative things if we were going to do anything there. And so we decided to go ahead and not move forward with that one. We are still moving forward with our Voter Participation Act, which would move off-year elections to even years. That one we have the first vote at the full board on Tuesday. And so I mean, if you feel so moved, we would really appreciate support on that. It has been a little more controversial than we expected, but we are having we have lots of support so far from labor partners. The Common Cause California submitted a letter supporting our effort, and we have received word that other civil rights organizations will be submitting letters as well. So it's well supported, except maybe, you know, there's still some work to be done at the board itself.
And the mayor's opposing.
Yes, the mayor is opposing.
Surprise. Yeah. Well, yeah, thanks so much, Melissa. Appreciate it. Thank you for those updates, for being here. And yeah, thank you again, Calvin, for your invaluable presentation on how they voted. Appreciate it. Yeah, so thanks. I know it's about 9, and yeah, I appreciate everybody coming and being here and sticking with us as we, you know, continue our meetings through Zoom, but, you know, still going strong. So it's good to see everybody.